That's one of the hard things about the producer or their engineer not being here, is trying to figure out what their end result as a drum sound is. And there's really two ways around that. It's the super question asking time. And that's what I do a lot at sessions, is ask a lot of questions. What was your thought for the end result of the sonics of the song? And all the playing stuff, obviously, we're talking about. But, what were you looking for drum sound wise? And that chooses a selection of gear and those kind of things. To be honest, the way that I've gotten around it here is just by tracking so much stuff on the drums that they can do anything they want. We'll put in 15, 16 tracks of drums. So, they got room mics, they got close mics on the toms, they got internal and sub kicks on the, kick drums, and a mono mic and close mics on, snare and batter side and snare side, and, all those things, so that like any drum sound they wanted to get out of it, they can.
How do I approach the miking? Well, I have a standard setup, and I leave it set up, and then I tweak it. So most of the time I know what works and I know what I like, and that is a completely standard drum mic setup like most people use. And I tend to find in my experience that whatever engineers I'm working with, they tend to use a very similar setup.
Yeah, phase at the tracking stage. I don't want to send out of phase tracks to anybody. Basically, you can adjust phase or get rid of it, let's say, by the knowing of where mic placement is. You're going to use the 1 to 3 rule on overheads, like up 1 distance and up wide 3 distance. Really, it's a matter of checking the mics that are in close proximity to each other, and going really through every mic. And usually what we do is like choose a mic, like a hi-hat mic, and then solo that with solo tom, solo tom, solo tom, solo kick, solo snare, and just going through and seeing if you hear anything phase. There are some plugins, like Waves has an in-phase plugin, which will do it for you, and you can flip things in the plugin, and that's pretty slick. But really, on the mic pre, you can do it, and that's usually done like kind of the first time you set up the room.
Jeremy Stacey was telling me he did an album with Glenn Johns. I was very, very interested to hear about the mic setup. It's a couple of 67s over the top and a D112, and he said this whole thing about does everyone measure it, and he basically doesn't measure it, he just slings them up and listens to it. So I thought it was encouraging, because that's what I do. I think the best thing to do is just try and listen to the sound. If you like what you're getting, great. If you don't like it, move it until you get what you like.
If it's a great drum, great mic pre, right into a digital like Pro Tools or whatever, you can, I've done a lot of stuff like that, and it sounds amazing. If you're going to invest money in something, we're aside from the drums and cymbals and everything, it needs to be mics and mic pre's.
Drummers usually know how to tune their kits well, if you do. And it's an environment that they feel happy in, which makes it work for them. Most drummers I know, they're notoriously, quite rightly, fussy about sonics, mic placement, controlling the sound of the kit. And I'd rather a good drummer who knows their own gear does it than me piling in there and going, I want that mic there and that mic there, and RE20 on the kick drum. It might not be the right one. A good drummer will know their kit and their room and their rig inside out, and so I use their expertise, and I'm quite happy to defer to them.
And then the next one is EQ, because if you're going to EQ to track, then you better EQ through a really high-end EQ and have it be spot on. That, or just don't have an EQ at all and let them do it in mix. But we do EQ here. We have all original API, 550As on everything, 560As on the rooms, which are the graphic. Like, if you got great drums and cymbals, really great mics, and a pre going into a digital recorder, you're 95% there.
love the classic, all the Earth, Wind and Fire drum sounds, which I think George Massenburg was in the main responsible for. Beautiful sound, really hi-fi but very soulful and very meaty. Love those sounds, love to mimic those.
Really, for me, it's about getting some air between the mic and the drum, you know, not having the mic so close to the head, and, you know, sticking essentially your ear a half inch away from a piece of plastic, you know. And I see guys do that, and I'm just like, well, it's the mic is your ear, and you're a half inch away from a piece of plastic. Like, of course, it doesn't sound great. I mean, it's more for a live thing, maybe, so you don't have feedback and think, okay. But like in a studio, like, let the drum be a drum. Like, get the mic up a little bit, 5-6 inches. Let the shell say something, and actually record that instrument rather than just the head.
Bruce Swedien is one of my heroes, and you know, the drum sounds on Off the Wall and the Michael Jackson records take a lot of beating. They're incredible. I love the sounds on pretty much all the Steely Dan records. Incredibly hi-fi yet satisfying. Elliot Shiner on Gaucho. I mean, I just can't get enough of it. Just love it. Love all the sounds on that. Love his work.
But the internal May mic and the snare is a little trick of mine, where it's a Beta 57 that's shock mounted. It's in a special housing so it'll fit in a snare drum, and it's upside down facing the snare, so the external mic is looking this way and the internal mic is looking this way on the snare, so you don't have any phasing, because phasing really happens when they're looking at each other. Right. And you get a great snare element sound. It doesn't leak into the bass drum, so I recommend people maybe checking that out.
Bruce Swedien, love everything he does. Al Schmitt, love everything he does. The drum sound that Frank Filippetti gets on Carlos Vega on James Taylor's Hourglass is just gorgeous. If anyone can replicate that, it's a nice thing.
For an approval MP3, I do, and the note that I send is, this is a recommended, you know, rough drum mix, meaning the amount of room versus close mic, you know, things like that. If I'm mixing it for a scratch thing, it's EQ'd to tape. So the signal chain goes through the API EQs to tape. So that is, for me, that's a part of our service. I don't compress anything, usually ever. I learned not to do that by watching some of my heroes like Steve Gadd and talking to people like Phil Ramone and Al Schmitt and those kind of engineers, where the dynamic interplay and mix of the kit was done by the player. You know, and I asked Phil Ramone years ago, like, you know, why did he use Gadd on all those records? And one of the things he said was because the drums were mixed. You could put up two mics and the drums were mixed because Gadd mixed it in his playing.
Love a lot of jazz records as well. James Farber. Love all the Pat Metheny stuff. It's very hi-fi, beautiful top end, great cymbal sounds. A lot of the contemporary jazz now, like you get Pat Metheny Trio recorded at Avatar in New York, all the stuff at Capitol. Amazing. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there who are doing some great things. Also, my friend Hayden Bendel, ex-Abbey Road, has done some great, fantastic, gets amazing drum sounds. So I'm lucky enough to work with him, so that's a nice treat too.
Jack Joseph Puig, you know, one of the great engineers and a great producer, and you know, I did Daniel Bedingfield's records with him, and really interesting sonics. You know, Jack would have like pieces of glass with PCM mics duct taped to them, and you know, a long throw, yeah, like a long throw bass speaker from like playing like an outside PA speed system, like, but the mic was like up inside the bass scoop, and what the drums sounded like when they went up in there to that mic, and you know, you're like, whoa.
Creative, wow.
Yeah. I would do like kick, snare, hat on a track, and he'd have 20 lines. You know, you're going like, what are you doing? Like, but I mean, it was super creative, and the sounds of everything. I think Peter Gabriel's records, especially the last couple, especially that Up record, was like amazing. It's like sonic art, you know, that those guys are so on top of what's going on sonically that it's like, I mean, it just blows me away, you know. I'm constantly learning about like mic placement and how it affects the way things end up on tape. And to be honest with you, the best sounding recordings come from the best performances. You don't have to overpaint the thing. Just, you know what I mean? It's like it can be a beautiful painting without having layers and layers and layers of paint on it.